Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Joe, and today we're going to put a wraparound deck of this shed. Alright, so everything we need to make this deck is pretty much right here on this trailer. Okay, before I go ahead and get started with the deck, we're just going to take a minute to clean up all of the stuff that I have underneath the porch here to give us some room to work. Now the first thing we need to do to build this deck is we need to get a ledger board onto the side of the shed. Now this is the most critical part to any deck that's going to be attached to your house or your shed. So here I'm just going to kind of speed through the ledger installation, but I do have a detailed video on step by step on how to install a ledger properly so that you have no water seepage or rot in the future. So go ahead and click the link in the upper right hand corner if you want more detail. But high level, there's really three main steps to installing your ledger, and they all have to do with flashing. So the first step is the flashing that's going to go behind your ledger. The second step is the flashing that will go over the top of your ledger, but also attached to the wall to carry any water or moisture away and over the top of the ledger rather than allowing it to go behind it. And the third and final step is a piece of solid flashing, usually some type of aluminum flashing, that will go on top of the second piece of flashing. And the reason for this is that most of the flexible flashing tapes don't have sufficient UV protection, so they break down over time. So you need that solid piece of aluminum to protect the adhesive flashing from deteriorating over time. The other thing to consider when you're installing your ledger is how you're going to attach it to your structure. Different areas have different codes and different parameters as to what you can and can't do. But in my case, I'm going to use some structural lags, and I am staggering them every 12 to 18 inches, altering from the top and the bottom. Alright, we have the third and final layer of flashing on, so our ledger boards are all set to go now. Perfectly weather tight so that we won't have any water going between the ledger board and the structure, and that watertight means no rot, so the structure should last for hopefully a really long time. So let me just give you a quick walk around, show you what it looks like, and then we'll get on to framing the deck. So on the barn door side, you can see I didn't put the ledger flashing underneath the barn door itself, and that's because I'm going to address that differently when I trim out the door and put the door sill in. But the flashing continues all the way down the front, under the door, and straight to the end. And there I'm just testing to make sure my flooring still fits, because I didn't take into account the extra 1/16 of an inch for the flashing. But since I gave myself about an 1/8 of an inch of wiggle room when I spaced the sill, it ended up working out perfect. So I got about a 1/16 of play in there, which I think is more than enough, and I'll be able to get the deck on easily. To save myself a bit of time, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut all of the joists for both the front deck and the side portion of the deck. While I'm doing this, I went ahead and I cut the rim joists for the front and the side as well. And as you can see here, I kind of already have the rim joists somewhat installed. That being, they're just kind of laid up against the 4x4 post holding up the porch ceiling. And you can see I had to notch them. The notching's not ideal, but originally I wasn't planning on putting a deck, and the deck was a bit of an afterthought. If I had planned for this, I would have sunk the concrete footers a little deeper. Now, how you support your deck is going to vary widely depending on where you live and the applicable codes, and depending on what you're doing. Whether the deck is attached to your house or it's attached to the shed may determine whether or not code is even applicable. In my case, the choice I've made here for supporting the joist of the deck, I'm actually going to use the rim joist itself to support the deck span. And I'm doing that for one main reason. The main reason is the deck itself is so low to the ground in order to maintain the level I need with the shed. To fit a beam running underneath all of the joists is going to be impossible unless I dig the beam into the ground. So I'm going to directly support the rim joists right there using 4x4 post that will get structurally screwed right to the rim joist. Now I could strengthen this up by sistering the rim joists, basically putting two 2x6s together to give it a bit more strength, but I'm very confident that since the deck is only 4 feet in depth, that the single 2x6 will be more than enough support. That coupled with I have a footing every 5 feet or so, I'm not worried about the structural integrity of this deck whatsoever. Okay, to install this side of the deck, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and secure 3 of the joists. Actually, it's going to end up being 4 of the joists because I messed up on one of them. But I'm going to secure 4 of the joists directly to the rim joists and to the ledger board on the shed. As I'm doing that, I'm going to lift up on the rim joist, and I'm going to use my level to make sure that there's a slight slope away from the shed. And for now, I'm just going to tack it into the 4x4 using my nail gun to hold the position. Once everything's tacked in place and all the joists are nailed in, I'll come back and I'll use structural screws to tie everything together. If it's not already super apparent, this is a extremely repetitive job. Basically, you're just going back and forth, nailing a joist in, or tacking it off, making sure that you still have the right slope away, and as needed, attaching any additional posts that are going to hit footers to maintain the stability of the deck. So here I'm just going back and forth, filling in all the joists, and as you're doing this, you'll be able to feel that everything's really getting strong and tight. And before you even get to the end here, basically you have a frame of a deck that is completely immovable. So just a little tip when you're using posts like this, never try to cut the post to the exact height that you think you need it. It's just going to be a struggle, and you're probably going to get the height wrong for whatever reason. Cut them long and then cut them off. Okay, so that's the harder of the 2 decks completely framed out. We'll take a look now. So there's my footing, my post, my rim joist, my joists, and then the ledger that we put on at the very beginning. You'll notice I'm not using joist hangers. That's again because they're like a 4-foot span, and it's supported every 4 to 5 feet regardless of direction. So I'm not concerned about the toenails not being able to support the joist. Now moving on to the front deck, which is actually the easier of the 2. And it's the easier of the 2 because the rim joist is just nailed to the front of the 3 4x4s that support the porch roof. And the rim joists are also just sitting on top of the concrete blocks. Now, as I mentioned, I did have to notch the rim joist, which isn't ideal because it's taking away some strength from the rim joist itself. But given how narrow the deck is at only 4 feet wide, I wasn't concerned at all about removing that strength from the deck. Now, for this run, this really was just a matter of cutting down all of my joists and then working my way down. So we have all the joists going all the way around the building done now. Now the next thing to do before you go ahead and just start decking, or in my case even going ahead and putting in the structural screws that are going to provide all the support, is to really think about the layout of your decking and where you're going to need support for that decking. So it's a lot easier to put blocking in now to make sure that you can fasten the deck down securely, especially where the joints are. So the way I'm going to put down the deck is I'm going to do full 16-foot runs from front to back here, but this is actually slightly longer than 16 feet. It's 16 feet 1.5 inches because of the way the rim joist sits in front of the pole. So from the face of that pole to the back of the shed is exactly 16 feet. So what I'm going to do, and this is going to help kind of pretty everything up a little bit, is there's going to be one deck board that runs this way all the way along the front, and then this decking will run vertically like this, and I'll be able to get one 16-foot board to go front to back. And then over here, this is 20 feet long from the corner to here, and I was only able to get 16-foot boards, so I will have to cut these, but I'm going to run from right here all the way down, and then again at the end I'm going to have a trim board that covers the end. So again, you really want to take time to think about how your deck boards are going to end and where you're going to need to secure them. So here I'm just adding blocking around all of the posts because you're going to want secure points to screw down your deck around each post. And as I finish up with the post, then I'm going to move to where the deck boards will terminate when they're coming into the casing piece that's going to go around the end, and you can see me doing that here. So because there's going to be a deck board that runs in the opposite direction here, I needed a piece of blocking to pick up the end of the deck boards that will be running the long span, the 20-foot span of the building. Now for the most boring part of the job, but also the most gratifying, because it actually starts to look like a deck now and you can walk on top of it. So here I'm just screwing in all the deck boards, and this really is incredibly repetitive. You do want to get 2 screws on every single joist, and you want those screws to be about 1 inch in from the outside of the deck boards themselves to prevent splitting in the future. But here you really just, going down the line, spacing your boards. You want to leave about 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch gap between your boards, depending upon how wet the wood is. Okay, so I'm putting down the decking, and you can see that there's a pretty good sized gap between the nail and the deck, and the board doesn't readily want to slide over. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you a real quick way how to force those boards together and get the seams to line up tight. You can use the same simple method if you're installing wood floors as well. I'm gonna take this scrap and I'm gonna cut a wedge out of it. The one thing that you want to do when you're doing this is you don't want to square scrap. Like, you don't want it to be a steep wedge. You want it to be a very gradual wedge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this from this corner probably to somewhere right here in the center, so that I have a very gradual wedge, versus cutting it from this corner to say up here, which would create a steep wedge. The steep wedge just isn't going to work. Okay, shallow edge. Now we're going to take the bigger part of that cut off, and we're going to screw it to the joist, right about like that. And you want to use 2 screws so this doesn't spin on you. Alright. and take your other part of the wedge, shove it in there. And as you tap that in, your seam will come together. See that now? So now we have a perfectly snug seam. So I'll go ahead and I'll fire 2 screws in there. You can take the wedge out, and if I need to pull 2 boards together again, I'll just save the wedge and I'll be ready to go. With the decking done on the side deck, I moved to the front deck, and the first step on the front was cutting out the board that was going to trim off the end all the way down the front. So this was the most difficult board because I had a notch cut around all of the posts. Here's another quick little tip. So I need to scribe that column over there onto this board, and I'm going to have a 45 on the end of it. If I just put this board right like that and scribed it, it would be close enough for a deck, but the cut would be on an angle because the board is sitting on an angle. So when you're scribing anything, you always want to have the length of what you're scribing to be perfectly perpendicular to what you're scribing it against. So I'm just going to take a piece of deck board matching the width of the board on the other end, place that on there, and now I can go ahead and scribe my line and I'll have a perfect fit. All right, now that I have my line on there, same thing, I need a 2-inch overhang. This line's wrong. Give myself an 1/8 of an inch. All right, so now I'm removing all of this and all of that, and that should line up nicely. Okay, let's see how we did. Okay, so we didn't do too bad. I could have, my angle was slightly off, but it's a deck. I'm not too concerned about being off that small amount right there. My gap around the post on this side is also a little bigger here than back here, but I think that's actually because the post itself has a small twist on it, because I have the exact same thing happening on this side where I have a smaller gap and a larger gap in the reverse. So I'm not going to worry about that, again, because it's a deck. As you can see, I couldn't help myself. I already had to pull out the chair to get the full feeling. And in case you're wondering, this is the view from the porch. Okay, so here's the completed porch. All the decking's on, all the way around. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you like this video and you haven't already, please go ahead and consider subscribing and giving me a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos on the shed, I do have another video of me putting cedar shakes on the shed, as well as a bunch of other videos of DIY projects on my channel. Thanks again. Bye.